Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vince Carr, and I'm the National Counselor for Education for the American Guild of Organists. And I'd like to welcome you today to this webinar on improvisation and the organ music of Jean Langlais by renowned Langlais scholar Anne Labounsky. Today's webinar is the final presentation in a series of webinars on organ teaching that was presented by the Committee on Continuing Professional Education this fall. I'd like to express my gratitude to the committee and to their director, Frank Crozio, for all their work in coordinating the logistics of these webinars. I also want to thank Don Cook, my predecessor, who put in so much work over the summer gathering our presenters and topics for your enjoyment this fall. When we were thinking about programming for the year, it became apparent that with so much physical distance between us, this type of online programming would be needed more than ever. Today's presentation is pre-recorded, and so I will present the video first, and then we will be followed by a live question and answer session with Dr. Labounsky. If you have a question at any point throughout the webinar, please feel free to enter that question into the Q&A box, not the chat. So in the Q&A box, which is to the right of those buttons that are at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you go down to the bottom, it's usually the rightmost button and it says Q&A. So enter your question there. If for some reason we run out of time and we don't get to your question today, rest assured that Dr. Labounsky will answer your question following the webinar. Without further ado, let us begin this webinar on improvisation and the organ music of Jean Langlais.
Good afternoon. My name is Anne Labounsky. Many people mispronounce it, but now you know how it's supposed to be pronounced. And my married name is Steele, so you can call me Steele if you want, or just Anne. And I'm so happy to be with you this afternoon in our wonderful Duquesne Chapel at the beautiful Dan Jekyll organ, which was installed in 2015. It has 3 manuals and beautiful sounds. It was inspired by Charles Tournemire, and I'm very, very grateful to have this organ here. In this program, I'm going to speak first about Langlais, his style, and his techniques, using some demonstrations from many different pieces. I'm not going to play any pieces all the way through, but just to show you as succinctly as possible his style. And then the second 20-minute segment will be on improvisation, and I will show you how I started with him and how he taught it, and show you 2 different forms, a short ABA based on the Kyrie Orbis Factor, and then a toccata based on the same theme. So Langlais, as you know, he was blind. He was blind from the time he was 3 years old, and he didn't get to study until he was 10 when he went to the School for the Blind. And, but he had a very good ear, and he had a formation already in Gregorian chant from before he went to the school in Paris. So his first organ teacher was André Marchal, who was also my teacher, who was also blind. And Langlais always said that from Marchal, he learned the poetry, the poésie of the organ. Then he went to the Paris Conservatory when he studied with Marcel Dupré. And from Dupré, he learned a very strict technique of the release of the repeated notes and the legato, And I'm going to demonstrate for you now a little bit of Langlais' legato. He was very strict about that. So here's an excerpt from his Suite Médiévale, from the meditation. With the left hand, you have chords, and you have to use the thumb glissando, like this. When you even go, so the thumb is a wonderful, it's like having two fingers. You can play on this joint or on this joint. And so we're going to be using both joints. The first joint like this, and here's the second joint like this. Now here we're going from a white key to a black key, playing really into the key and getting onto all the black notes like this. So that's what I wanted to show you about that. But his other very important influence was Charles Tournemire. We had a wonderful Tournemire festival here. I'm with Don Mao, this wonderful recording engineer. I'm so grateful to him. He recorded all of the sessions. From Tournemire, Langlais learned how to be very free, as Tournemire was in his playing, and also in the style of Franck. So you find then these different influences in Langlais' life. The strictness, and I would say that the strictness comes in pieces that are very straightforward, and many of them are quite loud. For example, the dialogue on the mixtures. These have to be played in a straightforward manner. This is like, also you all know the pasticcio of Langlais from the organ book, the same idea. That's an example. There are many others. For example, from the same medieval suite, the acclamations are in the same style. Same idea. You have also a piece such as the fete. That they have to be played in a very rhythmical way and quite strict. So that's the strict style that you have. And for example, the first symphony would be like that as well. But then there is a much freer style that is from, for example, pieces that are based on chant. The pieces that are based on chant, you have to really understand chant and the way chant is sung according to the Solem methods. For example, going back to this meditation from the Suite Médiévale, we have what I just showed you, the thumb glissando, and then ubi caritas. You have to count the chant, according to Maquereau, in the division of twos and threes. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that's how you get that beautiful flowing style of the chant. So you have that also in the Te Deum. did I put that? I have brought so much music, and I'm going to just play excerpts for you, not the whole. Oh, yeah, it's right here in front of me. So, for example, in the Te Deum, another very famous piece, you have the elements of the chant and also the strict part. So the Te Deum theme in the beginning is quite free, but that's followed by the enthusiastic acclamation of everyone. So here is the beginning of the Te Deum. Then enthusiastic. And it goes on like that. So that gives you an idea of, you have two elements, a strict style and a very free style. So then there's another style in his music, which are pieces that are based on folkloric melodies. So for example, you have from the Nativité, one of his best known works, Les Bergers, the second movement of that. The Shepherds. So that should not be played in that free a style. It's just have to be played in a rather straightforward way. All of his chant, all of his folkloric tunes are in that vein. And so you have to ask yourself, what type of a melody is it? Is it a chant melody? Is it a folkloric melody? Or then the third kind is the original themes. The original themes, many of them were based on people's names. This is using the code. The code did not originate with Langlais. Other composers used it. For example, Duruflé used it. Bach a little bit, if we think of of his. Schumann, of course, but Langlais took it to a much greater extent than those other composers. His first example of writing people's names was actually in the organ book, where you remember the pasticcio. And then the second theme of that's the name of Jacqueline, Marchal's daughter, because the whole book was a wedding present that he wrote for her. And the great irony of that is that Langlais said, I was very poor and I couldn't afford to get her an expensive wedding present, so I wrote this piece. And that was the collection for which he received the greatest amount in royalties. So it's kind of a funny thing that. So you have then the people's names in music. I spent a long time studying his music and studying the people to whom he dedicated the pieces. And that was often a clue, because these people had their names in the music. The example that I want to show you now is one from his his collection called Progression. This was published by Bornemann. And while he was composing this work, his beloved dog, Puff, died. And it just really made him almost crazy because he loved this dog so much. Well, many of you can relate to that. You lose a pet, and it's terrible. He said, I was about to play a recital, and I didn't know if I would be able to play it because I was so upset, so in such grief from my loss of Paf, P-A-F. And he wrote the inscription, à très doux ami que je pleure mon petit chien, Paf. And so the theme of this piece is based on the dog's name, P-A-F. Let me see, forward number 1. Here is this. Oops. All right, we have to find the right, here we go. Repeats it again. Sometimes he changed it a little bit. That's one example. There are many other examples. I mean, he dedicated several pieces to me, and my name is AFF. And he loves to improvise on people's names. I have found this code very useful. I use it with my students. I use it, for example, if I'm going to play a funeral, I might improvise on the person's name using the code, or a wedding, the same idea. Take the person's name and use that. So that's the way, a very brief resume of his style. And you have to really look carefully at this music, because not all the pieces are based on people's names, but many are. Even before he did that, some of the pieces are expressing great feelings of loss. For example, not only the dear dog, but when we look at the 9 pièces, 9 pieces composed during the World War II, he lost his teacher of composition, Paul Ducasse. And the first piece was called Chant de Peine. And in this piece, he was expressing great sorrow, and you can feel that in the music. So although it's not based on his name, it has great feeling of sadness in it. And you have to play that with a certain amount of freedom because of that. And freely. So you just feel the emotion that he was feeling when he wrote the piece, contrasted to the second one, Chant de Joie, which is so filled with joy. So all of these are some of his very best pieces, And then looking at another one in that same collection, Chant Héroïque, written during the war, just also after the death of his very dear friend Jean Langlais. The Chant Héroïque is the same idea, and so that has to be played with a great deal of passion, and he even says con fuoco. So that's the first part, and the second part will be about improvisation. So Langlais was a marvelous improviser. I had always wanted to study improvisation, and Marchal did not teach it at that time, although he was a very fine improviser himself. But he said, you may have permission to study this with Langlais, and that's how it was that I started to study with Langlais. Langlais based his improvisations on Gregorian chant. At that time, I didn't know anything about chant. I just had never learned it. And I still remember the first theme that he gave us. It was the Kyrie to the Mass Orbis Factor. It goes like this. In the first mode. And so he gave the theme, and he dictated the theme, and we wrote it down, and then he said, improvise. And I said, had no idea what to do. But he would guide us as we improvised, and the only thing was that we were not allowed to stop. So we had to just keep going somehow. So this was, what I'm going to show you now is a kind of form that he used for, it's an ABA form with an introduction, the cantus firmus then in the soprano, a little interlude modulating away from the main key and returning to the main key, and then the chant would be repeated but slightly changed. After that, the B section is a short development going through several key changes, taking a fragment from the theme. And then finally, there's a recapitulation where the cantus firmus is in the pedal at 4/4. So that's the first form that he taught us. And then he also, after that, taught us about how to do a toccata. And that's a very useful thing. Everybody needs to be able to do that easily. And so I'm going to show you now the different techniques that he used, and that's what I do in teaching my students about that. So the Kyrie Orbis Factor, an introduction, anything. You're just kind of setting the mood and the you can do something very simple. Go away from that key. And then come back to it. Short development takes a motive. I take that maybe, a motive is a very important part of improvisation, because you can take any fragment of any melody and use that to develop it. So I would maybe take I'll go to a different key center. Maybe I'll go to E minor. And the third part is going back to the original theme, and I will put the cantus in the pedal. That's a very simple form that can be used in so many different ways. So that development is just really important because it's taking you away from the main key. So then the second form that he used, a toccata, could be the same ABA form. But what's different about this is that the style is very different. You are using, you have to first develop, you have to first find a sort of a figure that that's going to drive it. And so what he said was use the fingers 2 and 4 in both hands. It's very simple that way. And so I'm just going to, I'll show you different figurations that will work. You just have to experiment. So that could be one, or, see, I'm just trying different things. And then you have to always repeat that. Okay, so that's whatever motive I decide to use. I'm just going to get it going and do it so it feels comfortable. So it could be one that's more spread out. And I like going up with the left hand, coming down with the right hand. Oh, I like that. Some of them you're going to think, I'll try it. Oh, I don't like that one. No, you have to find what you like. You could use the same figure with the left hand. Okay, actually, there are so many other figurations that you. But you know, whatever you do, don't make it so complicated that you can't do it easily. So then, after you do that, and you put the theme in the soprano, or you could put the theme in the pedal first. First, I get my motive going. So it's harder to put the theme in and play it while you're still got the motive going. But that's very important to be able to do that. And now I'll go into the development. And the development, probably make it softer. Go to the swell. What he often did was, you would recognize from many of pieces that he wrote with big chords. Often ending with an open fifth is very useful. This doesn't sound very good. You could do that, but a lot of times just an open fifth at the end sounds more, just, I don't know, more in the style. When you improvise, you can't think about everything that went wrong. That's the main thing. That's the big downfall. So you have to just keep going with what you're doing. And then whatever little things that were not just what you wanted, if you keep going, it won't seem so bad. Someone asked, how do you improvise in this style? That is the essence of it. You have to finally hear it. You hear a style. It's like jazz, you know. How do you improvise in the jazz style? I don't do that. It's not part of what I know. But you just practice little things. Like I was showing you with his, practice those little motives like that until it feels really comfortable. Some of the things, I don't like that. You think, oh, that was just awful. And then you'll just explore, and gradually you'll find the thing you like. And then you'll just say, okay, that was really good. So then you'll try to do more that's like that. But you just have to not be afraid. I was so afraid. And Langlais said, you can't stop. You just have to keep going. And you know, one of the things I remember so well is that he would put his hand on your shoulder to lead you. And then he would say, change the key here, go to another key. He would never say this key. He would just say, modulate, go somewhere. And it was very free. And then after you were doing that, I mean, people who just, you thought, oh, they'll never be able to do anything. You know, they somehow could do it so well. People, I remember in our class at the Schola Cantorum, there was one student who was very, she was really a poor, you know, didn't have much technique. Somehow he got Monique to do some things that were very interesting. So that just making yourself do it and doing it every day, it makes such a difference. And if you're a church organist, as most of you are, I know, do it in church. Make yourself do it. I improvise the postlude every Sunday. I love to do that because, you know, it keeps it going. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm taking little motives. The idea of the motives are very important because it gives you so many ideas, so many things you can do with that. And it's something that people know, which is very helpful. So starting with the chant, I love to improvise on the chant, but you know, if you're doing this for church services, I usually improvise on the last hymn, and so that's not going to be a chant. But the freedom to actually do that is going to work if you do it that way. A lot of things are not going to work. And you're thinking, oh, that was just awful. But that's all right, because it's by doing it over and over again and not being afraid to do it. I remember Antoine Robelot, who gave a number of master classes at Duquesne. He worked with some students who had very weak backgrounds, and he said, well, you can start by just expressing an emotion. So if you go right to the essence of how you feel, for example, he said, just play anything that is very peaceful. Then he said, play something that if you feel angry, you know, just that would give a different feel. And that's a good way to approach it too. So there are many ways that it can be approached, but I think the main thing is to do it and do it frequently, every day. You'll find that after a while, and the other thing Langlais used to say was, your best teacher is your recorder. And now it's so easy for us because almost all of us have iPhones. You can record each session, and then you can listen to it as if you were a different person, and you think, oh, that was just horrible. But then, you know, oh, that was really nice. So I really like that part, and I'm going to just hold on to that. So these are techniques that you can learn by yourself, but also a good teacher always helps. And Langlais was a wonderful teacher. I'll always be so grateful to him. And thank you for joining us today. I enjoyed our time together. And I enjoyed our Duquesne Chapel and the beautiful organ, the Dan Jaco organ here.
Hello, everyone. Oh, Vince, did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'd now like to welcome Anne live for our question and answer session.
Oh, okay.
So we actually have Anne over at Duquesne. She's assisted by her student Thomas. So we should be able to get them momentarily.
Okay.
There we go. Hello, Anne.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's so great to see you. And thank you all for coming to the webinar. And I see we have some really good questions. We'll go through these questions and try to answer them. Someone, RS in Detroit, asks, in the Te Deum, I have been taught that the opening chant phrase are connected to the following exclamatory currents. Yes, of course. I just didn't have the manuals adjacent. They should be. Yeah. Okay, the second question by Anne Matlack. Did Langlais ever have have you sing the chant in lessons? No, he never did. No. And then Joel asks, were all of Langlais' improvisations based on some type of form as you've described, or could they have been purely on the spot? Oh, I love that question. You know, I was with Langlais on his tour of 1964. So I heard him every place he played, and he ended the recitals always with an improvisation. And, you know, he would write it down in Braille, and then he would improvise. And also very often I heard him at Saint Clotilde, and they were all different. I want you to know that. Now, Koshiro, for example, they all sounded the same. You know, I mean, he had like his thing that he always did, and they always came out more or less the same. But with Langlais, it was always different. It was the theme that inspired him to do what it was. So now let's see that. Oh, dear Doug Murray. Now, going back to the question before that. So yeah, so with Langlais, they were all different. They were all on the spot, and that's what I found so inspiring. Then Doug writes, big question. Doug, who actually won the improvisation competition, he's a very good friend from Nashville. A big question, you may answer as much or a little as you wish. Could you contrast the harmonic language of Langlais, Messiaen, and Koshiro? Ah, that's a big one. So the harmonic language of Langlais. Well, you have to just study his music. And well, you know, Langlais' first wife, Jeanette, often said that Langlais was best in his early pieces. They were so often based on chant. And then he reached a period in the 1970s when, you know, Langlais always idolized Messiaen, and he was trying to imitate his style. So when you find, well, even for example, in the Apocalypse, the movement that he dedicated to Messiaen, it really sounds like Messiaen's style. And also the Three Voluntaries is that way. And that wasn't, in a sense, it was not really his best, most natural language. Koshiro, yeah, I mean, Koshiro was a very brilliant organist, but I heard him a number of times, but to me, it was always more or less the same. Now, I'm sure people may disagree with that, but he had these little trucs, as they say in French, you know, these little things that he always did, and so he was sort of, oh, you knew that was Koshiro because he did those things. And maybe people would say that about Langlais too, that, well, I was showing you a little bit in the improvisation that I was demonstrating, actually about his improvisations. He taught many other forms too. For example, he taught the symphonic forms such as the symphonic allegro and the scherzo and many other forms too. So I was just showing you just one, but there were many others. And then Aaron McAdams writes, thank you so much. I know a good teacher is the best way to develop good improvisational skills. Are there any textbooks that you can recommend for self-study of improvement? Well, I've used, in my teaching at Duquesne, I've used a lot of them. I've used the Dupré, you know, the exercice préparatoire à l'improvisation libre. That's for the free improvisation. It's very strict. You know, we started by harmonizing the scales and then harmonizing melodies. And this is an interesting thing that Langlais always claimed that he gave Dupré those melodies, and some of them are very good. Oh, and then Ken Danchik writes, did Langlais use Dupré's improvisation method? No, but I was just saying that he did give, Langlais claimed that he did give, well, they all learned. You see, you have to remember the thème libre. That was a form that was taught really at the Paris Conservatory since the time of Franck. And the example that you see of that in Franck's writing, of course, is the beautiful Cantabile. And so that was used, and then many others too. And Dupré's 2 volumes are very comprehensive. You know, he covers all the forms. So then Leah Different printings of the Te Deum varied. The tempo markings, yes. Which is the correct tempo? Well, it's a lot faster than the original ones. The original one was way too slow. I think that this is one of those rare examples where there was an updated edition, and they did actually correct some of the misprints. And so I think it's 80, and so it goes, whoops. It's like what I was showing you in the chapel. So yeah, so that's, are there any others there? Okay.
Yeah, this
Oh,
one
there's
about,
another one.
was he thinking in octatonic modes or bitonality or something else to come up with the formula for the chords? Like in the,
Yeah, you know, he used the octatonic scale a lot. They all did. As a matter of fact, I remember speaking with Tournemir's Daniel Lesueur and studying one of his pieces, La Vie Intérieure. And I said, oh, I noticed that you use the octatonic scale in this piece. And he said, oh, I didn't realize. And that was true so much with Langlais too. I mean, these things were part of his vocabulary. He wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to use the octatonic scale, but he just did that because he did that. Oh, then, okay, does that help you? Being blind, how did Langlais find his way around a new organ while touring? That's a wonderful question. I remember that very well since I was with him in '64. And of course, my dear friend Susan Ferre was with him, I believe in 67 or 69. What he did was he knew exactly which pistons everything was going to be on. And he could register any recital on any organ in 1 hour. And I always just marveled at that. And it was very simple because he knew where the general pistons were. And one was for the Couperin, the offertoire from the convents, you know, and then it went on from there. And so he just pushed those. And I remember one time when I was with him, I said, oh, gee, that's not really the authentic registration. Why are you doing that? And he said, ne complique pas la vie. Don't complicate it. So, and then Charles Steele writes, are the Langlais recordings still available? Oh, yes. Tell about them. You'll see that in my, if you look at the handout that you have with your, it's there. The Voix du Vent recordings are all there and they're all available. There are 13 volumes, 26 CDs, and you can get them and just look at the things that was sent to you. Charles, oh dear David McFarland writes, how strictly did he want his printed tempos adhered to? Oh, I love that question. That's, well, I think he did want them adhered to, but sometimes you could play, a lot of times they were too slow, and so you had to play them a little bit, faster. Tim Link asks, please talk about the ending of mode 6 and 8, in mode 6 and 8, 6 and 8 pièces modales. I'm going to have to look at that score. I will write to you with that answer. I don't have it right in front of me. How could Samuel Chismar writes, how could one improvise in the quote language of Messiaen, a unique language created by Messiaen? Well, that in a sense is easier because you have to know very well the modes of limited transposition, and you can practice those. That's easier in a sense than Langlais.
he also codified and published his own theory book about that.
Oh yes, of course, Messiaen wrote up to a certain point, and then he didn't want to write any more about it, but he did in the beginning. So James Roman asked, did Langlais dictate? Oh yes, I love this question. Did Langlais dictate scores or write them himself? How are they proof for publication? Oh, I love this question. This is So he wrote them in Braille. And then he had to transcribe them. And his first wife, Jeanette, would write, he would say like, do, third line. And then it was very painstaking, note by note. And when he mentioned, for example, his great Requiem, which was very long, and how long it took them to transcribe that from Braille. But here's the problem. How were they proofed for publication? That's where you get the problem of the mistakes in Langlais's music. Langlais was always a very impatient person. He loved the creative process of actually creating the work. But then when that was done, he didn't want to go, it was unlike Messiaen, who was very picky and would go back, and there were very few mistakes in Messiaen's music. But in Langlais' music, yes, there were a lot of mistakes. And Kathleen Thomerson and I started this project of identifying all the errata. And we worked and worked and worked on that. And he went along with us, and it was going pretty well. And then after a while, he said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't agree with this. And he said, because if people knew how many mistakes there were in my music, they wouldn't want to buy it. Which of course was not the case at all. But anyway, that was you had to know Langlais. You had to know what his personality was like. So yes, he dictated them first to Jeanette, and then some to his son Claude, and then some to some students, and some, I think that Mary Louise might have done some as well. And then Roberta Rowan Raybould asks, what composer was Langlais's favorite literature to teach? Oh my gosh. Well, he loved Tournemire. And so he taught Tournemire. He loved Franck, of course, and then he loved to teach Franck. He taught a lot of Bach. I didn't study Bach with him. I studied Bach with Marshall, but I wouldn't say that he had a favorite. And then, I think he did like to teach his own music, and I studied a lot of his music with him, and that's how it was that I decided to record it. And then Samuel Chismar writes,
It's a score for a football game.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was at the University of Michigan. I was at the University of Michigan in 1962. All right, is that all the questions? Because we have some other really, we run out, we're almost out of time, I think. But there were some other really good ones that Colleen Lissy articulated.
What about number 7?
Number 7.
The use of rubato.
In the compositions of Langlais that have the strictness element, is there any room for rubato playing in them? Yes, of course, a little bit, but not as much as in the chant, for example. How do Langlais and other blind organists learn the hands and feet parts of the organ music? Well, that's really interesting that they did everything with Braille, and they learned the pedal part, they learned the right hand, and then they put it together measure by measure. Okay, then she also asked, for the Langlais compositions that are based on folkloric themes, are they derived from his homeland in Brittany? Yes, many of them are, but not all of them. For example, I was thinking a lot about that. I think of the Esquisse Roman, and it was Jacques Chaillet who gave him those themes. Some that were the themes from the Crusades. And so there were other people who gave him themes. I think also that, what's his name? The American gave him some too. Oh, I wanted to point out to you just before we close, the Langlais website, which is run by his wife, Mary Louise Langlais. And you put in jeanlanglais.com, and that gives you all of the of his music. You have the scores, you have the recordings, and it's a wonderful website. And I just can't say too much about that.
And where are your recordings online? Your recordings are now online.
My recordings, you can get them from La Voix du Vent. That's
Aren't they online somewhere too?
No.
Weren't they uploaded?
No.
Oh, no, not yet.
No. So you have to, and you can't get any of his, I don't believe you can get any of his music on IMSLP.
No.
So you have to, I like to use Lois Fife music for his, sometimes I've used Sheet Music Plus, but, and then people asked about the Uncle Max column, which gives those, you know, that tells it about the Braille notation. Uncle Max Miller, I had met him first in the certification committee in New York. He taught at Boston University and he had that column, Uncle Max. I'm not sure how many years he had that. And then I also call to your attention the annotated organ works of Jean Langlais. This came out of a workshop I gave for the in New Jersey. And so I put down all of his works and the level of difficulty, the publisher, and then the four types, you know, the strict, rhythmic, the chant-based, free, folkloric, and the original things. Just trying to categorize those so that you could have an idea of how they were.
And the link to that document is embedded in the 9-page PDF that had all the music examples.
Yeah, so this and I thank so much Tom Conroy for putting in those musical examples. That was wonderful for him. And my dear friend and student Colleen Lissy for working so hard with all of you to make this work out so well. I've so enjoyed our time together. Is there anything else? I think that's it. Yes?
There's Dana coming back.
Dana? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm trying to see what's going on here. Wait a minute. Having a Zoom problem. There we go. I'm Dana Robinson, and I bring you greetings from the Committee on Continuing Professional Education today. It sure has been a treat to hear Anne Labounsky speak about the teaching and music of her beloved teacher, Jean Langlais, today. This session concludes the series of webinars sponsored by this committee this fall. And I hope if you know somebody that would be interested to see this, that it will soon enough be archived and available on the AGO website. I think this is something for everybody to watch. And thanks again, Anne, for a great presentation.
My pleasure. I enjoyed so much being with you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think we're ended.